Hello there, Max right here, and I'm excited today. So there is so many things going on in the world. We've got the European banking crisis is really accelerating. They're so-called past their stress test, but they haven't really, and everybody knows it, and it's kind of funny. We have the Jubilee coming up, and I thought, listen, now is the time to get your financial house in order, because there is definitely something coming. It's going to be big. We don't know if it's a complete financial reset. We don't know if it's just a correction. We don't know what, but we do know that it's better to be a month or 2 or 3 months early rather than being 1 day late. So what I've done this week, I've called up a whole bunch of my friends. We're talking to Ed Griffin, the author from Creature from Jekyll Island. We're speaking to Doug Casey, the original international man. We're speaking to David Morgan from the Morgan Report, and we're going to be giving you lots of great information with a full catch-up about what's going on, and most importantly, the specific action steps which you can take to protect your assets right now, no matter what is just around the corner. And for all intents and purposes, or from all things that we know, there is something big just around the corner. And of course, today you can see on your screen Jeff Berwick, the dollar vigilante himself. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good, Max. How are you?
Well, I'm awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. As I'm speaking to Jeff, everybody, you'll notice just over here on the far side, on the right-hand side of the screen, you will notice that there is a spot there where you can register for an upcoming online webinar, which I'm doing. It is called the Great Wealth Transfer Online Training. While we're talking, go ahead and choose a date and time and select that, because we're giving away some free goodies at the end, and the first 200 customers to register will get that for free. So, Jeff, let's talk about some news that's going on. I mentioned earlier we've got the European banking crisis. How about we start there? Why don't you catch us up on what's going on with that?
Oh, where to begin? Of course, this started a long time ago. In fact, all of these problems started in 1913 with the founding of the Federal Reserve. And you mentioned you're talking to a friend of ours, Griffin. That's actually what got me learning about all this stuff more than a decade ago. That book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And of course, that's really what started it all off. And interestingly enough, we just passed the 45th anniversary of the second worst thing that ever happened since 1913, which was the Federal Reserve. And that was in 1971 on August 15th. When they took the U.S. dollar effectively off a gold standard. Hardly anyone remembers that or knows about it, but that was really the final death knell in this system, in this financial monetary system. Now, of course, it takes time to play out, and in fact, the financial monetary system almost collapsed in the 1970s, but they made it through that and the big reason they made it through was because there wasn't enough debt in the system yet. So most of the governments didn't have much debt because they were restrained by gold at that point in time. So even the U.S. government in 1971 had $300 and something billion worth of debt, is now over $19 trillion. So ever since 1971, they've been unrestrained by that. And we've gone through a number of crazy instances, including the tech bubble crash in 2000, the housing bubble crash in 2008. These are all created by the central banks. So this has been a long process of complete collapse in process, but we're nearing the end stages now, in my opinion. When I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, I said it wouldn't be more than a decade before this all falls apart, all fiat currencies become worthless, all banks are closed, most governments are bankrupt. That's exactly where we're headed, and that's what's going on right now. And you brought up Europe. Europe seems to be ground zero for the beginning of this crisis and collapse, and Europe's actually been falling apart quite a bit over the last few years. Of course, it started in general, well, you can look back you can look back more than a decade, but it started generally to really speed up in Cyprus when they had in 2013 their bank Bailins, where the Cyprus banks were so broke from owning government debt that was worthless that they, over one weekend, they just closed all the banks, and by the time they reopened again, they had taken half of almost everyone's money from them. In fact, ever since then, all of Europe, the European Union, Canada, the US to some extent, and Australia have all written in bank bail-in clauses. So they are planning, they're expecting us the same thing, and they're probably going to do the same thing, is close the banks and take most of the people's money whenever the banks are in too much trouble or the government's in too much trouble, which is actually the case. So we're looking at Europe right now. Of course, started about a year ago with the what they call the refugee crisis, which is actually a created crisis by the same people who run the banks. Very nefarious, these people, what they do, and they try to break up the European Union on purpose to cause enough chaos to bring in essentially a one world government. So we're seeing that now. We're also seeing what happened with Brexit in Britain. That happened in June. The day after that, we had the worst stock market crash, a one-day crash of all time in June. So it was just a few months ago. Of course, the year started off with stock market crashes in January. It was the worst January for worldwide stock markets in history. And then it was about a year ago, last August, that we had the biggest one-day intraday point collapse on the Dow of over 1,000 points. And I always say, if you see this much sort of volatility going on, it essentially means that this system is in a lot of trouble or even dying. As things die, as you know, Max, well, I don't know if you know, but if you've seen on nature shows, generally before an animal dies or whatever, they go through some sort of spasms and things like that. That's generally the way I see the markets. And Europe is happening right now. Now we're seeing numerous European Union countries about to leave. That really leaves the question, will the euro currency even be standing even a year from now? So people with, and that's going to have effects, even if you're American, that's going to have effects on you as all these banks collapse. It was actually only one bank that really caused the 2008 crisis, and that was Lehman Brothers, and that was very small compared to many of these big banks that are in huge trouble in places like Italy. Even in Germany, Deutsche Bank, which is way bigger than Lehman Brothers, is in massive problems. Their stock price is down more than 50% in the last year. Their last recorded profits were down 99% year over year. Everyone's talking about how it's about to collapse. If that collapses, it could set off a worldwide financial crisis, and that's actually what I am expecting.
I completely agree with you, and yeah, the Deutsche Bank example is just one of many, but it just that one, that is all it would take for just massive ripples throughout the whole system. And because of the interconnectedness, because of the contagion, so-called, now with the interdependence of all the banks, it will cross continents, it will cross oceans, it will be a worldwide phenomenon. When something as massive as Deutsche Bank goes down, there's going to be a lot of other things that go down as well. Possibly, there's the way they can solve it is with the bail-ins. We speak about that often. That's definitely an ace up their sleeve, which they have. I say it's an ace. It's an ace for them, not for us. Because what they'll do is they literally steal money out of our bank accounts to hand off to the bankers and cover their losses. But of course, if they don't do that, then the alternative is to just print the money, which steals money out of our pocket via inflation to give the money to the bankers and cover their losses. So that's what's coming. Now, it's kind of ironic, I think, that all of these things are happening, and you're kind of an expert with the Shemitah and the Jubilee year. Why don't you catch up our listeners on exactly what that is and how that works?
Sure. I've actually done numerous years of research into the financial elites, the people who really run the world, the people who run the governments. It's not Barack Obama, it's not Janet Yellen. They're teleprompter readers on behalf of other people, and you don't actually elect them. They are selected by other people. As people hopefully found out during even just with what happened with Bernie Sanders, all these things are rigged. They just put in whoever they want. Essentially, people in the U.S. today live in a dictatorship. They have since the 1950s, when the last president who tried to fight back against these banking interests was killed, and that's ever since then. Every president has just done whatever they say, and that continues to go on. So we're just seeing incredibly interesting times for people out there, and how it's all going to play out. I don't know exactly, but it's going to be interesting. So what's going on in terms of October of this year is it's very complicated. It would take me quite a while to explain, but I've been talking about this for the last year. Is that they have a timeline. These elites have a general timeline on when they try to do things. They're very occult. These people are actually quite satanic, the people who run these things. And so they have this sort of a occult satanic timeline. And even Christine Lagarde of the IMF has done a speech on numerology and the magic number 7. And then the magic number 7 relates to something called the Shemitah. So every 7 years, there's something called the Shemitah. And it just turns out that almost every Shemitah, there's a massive financial crisis during that year. Well, the Shemitah ended last year, but it turns out every 7th Shemitah, so every 49 years, every 7-year period, is something called the Jubilee, and that's supposed to be a culmination of all the Shemitahs. It's supposed to be an extension of the Shemitah. Some people even call it a super Shemitah. That ends on October 2nd of this year. And now here's the really interesting part. I keep finding things that are happening all around that date, all exactly right around that date. For example, on October 1st, the IMF is going to add the Chinese yuan into the SDR basket, and that actually occurs over a weekend. And very often when they're going to close banks, they do it over a weekend. It's very interesting they're doing that on a weekend. It's also interesting it's the day before Jubilee. It's also quite interesting, and this is new information I just found out, that ICANN is going to transfer, or essentially the U.S. government is going to transfer control or ownership, or how you care to define it, but essentially sort of control of the internet over to the UN on October 1st as well, which I am starting to speculate they might be doing some sort of internet kill switch on that day. We'll see. They've been talking about internet kill switch for a long time. So I actually expect very crazy things to happen around that time, actually between now and October. And then I think it's just going to carry on after that. But I think there's going to be a lot of craziness, including war, which is a massive, there's so many countries in and around Syria right now. It's absolutely unbelievable. If you just try to count them, you can't even count them. There's the U.S., there's Russia, there's Iran, there's Israel, there's Turkey, the Saudi Arabia. They're all flying around, and they all say they're attacking different people, but they're not really, and it's all lies, of course, and the biggest lie comes from the U.S. government, because the U.S. government has been funding ISIS. They also funded Al-Qaeda, and this goes way back. As I said, the people who run the U.S. government are incredibly evil, and people need to wake up to that. But this is all I expect to really cause massive problems coming into this fall.
Yeah, man, so much good content in there. And I agree with everything you said. My mind was triggered back to a fond memory. Comedian Bill Hicks used to say this comment. He said he's convinced that as soon as a president gets elected, that they bring him into a room and they show him a secret footage of the JFK assassination from another angle, which shows exactly what's happened. And then the new president's question is, well, what are my policies, sir? But I actually think it even goes one step before that. And I think this kind of election's really highlighted that, in that you, exactly as you say, the presidents are selected, not elected. And by the time we get to vote, the decisions have already been made. The people we get to choose from already, that's selected way before we get involved. Now, this election's been a little bit different. You've seen Bernie, you've seen Trump. I mean, are these people anti-establishment? Are they not? Is it pretend anti-establishment? I suspect that they actually are anti-establishment, and I suspect that this is a real warning sign for the elites who run the world, because they are really losing their handle of the narrative. The narrative that the propaganda machine that is the mainstream media is losing the battle, and people are choosing to get their information from websites of people like yourself, myself, lots of other great YouTubers and bloggers out there, and the independent media is really stepping up and slaughtering the mainstream narrative, and almost in real time, as fast as they can lie, we can knock it down, and enough people find out about it that it doesn't really take root and take hold. Now, we're going to continue our conversation with Jeff here in just a minute. We're going to go through the exact things that you can do to prepare for this financial collapse, so that you can protect your wealth and protect your wealth and make money during that process. While we do, I just want to remind you, just over to the side of this screen, over here on the right-hand side, I am doing the Great Wealth Transfer online training. I do these a couple of times a year. They are $197, but for the first 200 people, they are free. And if you go ahead and register for that, you will also get an email with all the other interviews I'm doing this week with people like I said, Doug Casey, Ed Griffin, Dave Morgan, and others. So go ahead and do that. Jeff, let's get to the solution-orientated stuff. What are some things that people can do to protect themselves against the financial calamities which could be just around the corner?
Well, I think number one is to educate yourself. Most people have no idea about any of this information. They still pay attention. And you pointed out that the mainstream media is dying in the U.S. and is dying around the world. And that's actually right. And that's actually wonderful. I think there was a poll done in the U.S. where it said that only about 6% of people in the U.S. actually believe what they see on the television news is real. And actually, that's 6% way too many, but that's pretty good. That's 94% who actually know that this is propaganda. The U.S. is... it's unbelievable the amount of propaganda. Whenever I'm in the U.S., I never watch TV. I haven't watched TV in 20 years, and maybe that's why I'm able to think properly, because it's called programming for a reason. It essentially is brainwashing. And but when I walk by a screen, I'll see CNN, and what they're talking about it seems insane to me. It's like that's not even real. It's like watching like a fiction show or something.
Pro wrestling, I call it.
Yeah, basically pro wrestling. Yeah, and so most people don't even know that. So if you're watching this right now, and you are kind of like, you probably got here somehow because you started to open up a little bit. You started to realize maybe what they're saying on TV isn't totally all true. So you're already a step ahead. But the real key is to take advantage and to continue to learn. I think people need to take advantage or take control of their own lives, especially their financial lives. That's pretty much one of the most important things, other than your health. You should definitely take control of your own health of your life, and don't just leave it up to doctors either. That's a whole other scam that we could go into in a whole other podcast. But your financial life is very important, especially, I know for me, I'm a man and I have a family, and the whole family thing, you worry, I better make sure I make enough money so I can feed my kids and they have a house to sleep in and things like that. So that should be something that you should really take control of by yourself. Now, of course, the government has really pushed, you need to have a government registered financial advisor and he'll tell you what to do. Well, I don't know about the people watching this, but I know most people just lose money with those people. They're usually working for Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, and they're just selling you the same things that the same people own. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs own the media, so they're hitting you with one thing and then they're taking your money on the other thing. You need to take control of your own assets and your own life and your own future, and so that's one of the things. And then, of course, as far as things you can actually do, I would really suggest that you get at least some, and I would suggest most, but at least some of your assets outside of the financial system. So if you're a person out there and you've got, let's just say $100,000 to make the math easy, and it's all in a bank account in the US, or even worse, Europe. If it's in Europe, actually, I would just turn off this video right now and go and take it all out right now before it closes. It's going to close any minute. I'm serious. But if it's in the US even, it's getting pretty close. So I would start to move at least some of those assets into other hard assets, things outside of the financial system, because when this happens, you're going to see the banks close. You're going to see even the stock markets close for a period of time. Now, I still like investing in some stocks, most specifically gold stocks and things like that, but that's mostly just to make massive profits if this system stays alive much longer. But if it doesn't, I have most of my assets outside of the financial system, and things, of course, like precious metals, gold and silver. And I think it's important as well. And it's not just buying gold and silver, that's just one step, but also being careful in how you do it, internationalizing it, because, of course, in 1933, in the land of the free, or the land of the fee, as I call it, in the U.S., they confiscated gold from all American citizens. They stole all the U.S. people's gold. This is the land of the free. This has happened before. And why did they do that? It was because the government was bankrupt at the time, and they were actually bankrupt again in 1971. That's when they took the gold backing away from the dollar, and now they're bankrupt again. And so they're probably going to take as much as they can from people. So I would suggest that people just get their assets, some of it at least, outside of that system.
I completely agree. And so, that strategization, the strategy is, yes, gold and silver, precious metals, hard assets, and the magic phrase is assets without counterparty risk, because paper, fiat currency, that has counterparty risk. Money, and the counterparty is governments and central banks. Money in the bank, most people don't know this, but when you deposit the money in the bank, that is no longer yours, that is the bank's money, and they choose to give it to you so that you continue depositing money with them, but that can turn around like that. So that has counterparty risk. The counterparty is the bank. Even in the stock market and other things like that, and you have these intermediaries like Schwab and NASDAQ and all those other things. There are all these intermediaries that have control of your money. But when you have physical precious metals, physical gold coins, physical silver coins, and things like that, all counterparty is removed. And if there are stresses on the financial system and lots of these counterparties go bankrupt or become insolvent, or there's some interruption in service, you still have your wealth. It's an incredibly important aspect. And as Jeff further goes on to say, internationalization is critical. Get some of your wealth out of your country. And I don't care which country you're in, no matter what country you're in, have some outside of your country, because the time may come where you may need to flee, you may need to move, or within that, even if you don't do that physically yourself, where you don't move, the wealth inside your country can be confiscated if the country gets that bankrupt and that desperate. And it's happened many, many times in history. So, Jeff, we're going to wind it up here, but just a reminder, guys, over here on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm conducting the Great Wealth Transfer webinar. It is over it's over an hour and 30 minutes of pure content. I go through the entire system, exactly how it works today, how it came to be, and how the potential collapse might happen, because it can go several different ways. We've already mentioned bailouts, we've mentioned bail-ins. There's alternatives, and you need different strategies in place so that you can protect your wealth and prosper no matter what goes down or how it goes down. I give you specific strategies on internationalization of precious metals. I give you specific strategies on how to acquire precious metals in the best way. And all of that comes completely free for the first 200 people who register for that webinar. So I really look forward to seeing you there. And if you do go ahead and do that right now, I'm going to throw in a special gift, which is my precious metals cheat sheet. It's one single sheet. I'm going to email it to you as a PDF, and on it are all of the brokers and dealers and storage houses of precious metals that I use all over the world. I've vetted them and I'm comfortable with them, and I store my metals there. So, because there's a lot of sharks out in the industry, and if I can protect people from going with any of the sharks, then that'll be something that I really, really want to do, obviously, and it's a tremendous gift. So go ahead and register for that now. And also, Jeff is so passionate about this project that we're doing here and getting the word out, helping people protect their wealth, because it's so important that we protect the middle class. The middle class, if the middle class gets annihilated in the next crash, then we're going to see some very, very tough times. So our mission is to help as much of the middle class as possible. And doing that, Jeff has a fantastic book out there called Getting Your Gold Out of Dodge. It goes through similar kind of strategies about precious metals being the savior and how to have it out of Dodge, i.e. internationalization. Now, Jeff sells that on his website, but he's been kind enough to let me give that away for free, and I'll be showing you how you can get that on the webinar. That's the Great Wealth Transfer webinar that you can register for on the side of this page. So, Jeff, any other thoughts that you have before we leave?
No, I think those are all good thoughts. People just need to start taking control, start to realize and take control of their own financial lives. Be aware, be incredibly aware at this moment in time. So many people have no idea that we're going to be entering into incredibly crazy and dangerous times, way worse than 2008. And it could start as soon as this fall, and actually I think it will. But at the very least, within a year or two, we're very close to the end of the system. So I really appreciate you trying to get this information out there to as many people as possible.
Yeah, the key is information. Education always pays itself back over and over and over again. Education is the most valuable investment you can ever make. So please take advantage of this free offer and invest your time to educate yourself on the best ways to protect your financial well-being. So Jeff, thank you very much for being with us. And everybody, take care, and I'll see you on the Great Wealth Transfer webinar.